Today, I want to share some lessons with you from one of the best resources out there. It's a very prestigious school. It's a school that just about everyone really wants to get into. It's one of the top Ivy League schools out there, and you probably by now have guessed who it is. It's actually Harvard University. They put a large amount of focus in startup activities, promoting startups, startup research, and all these different things. So, as part of some research I was doing not too long ago, I went out and I happened to stumble upon, frankly, a resource guide that was put together by Harvard about startups. And I'm calling today's episode Startup Advice from Harvard. The advice they gave in this guide was essentially aimed at aspiring entrepreneurs that were in early stage formation and or early stage growth of their startup. And the guide kind of goes through and analyzes and shares the insight that Harvard uses to gauge whether a startup is commercially viable or not. And I thought this would be great information for you because you can take these same factors, some of them I've discussed in the past on the show, and you can take a look at them and see how your own idea or the growth of your own startup measures in these areas. So I want to run them through with you today. And first, we're going to start with demand. Of course, you have to have demand for a solution. You have to have someone who wants to buy or use the solution that you're making. And so Harvard's first factor that they look for in a startup being commercially viable is demand. They want to see that people are interested in what you're doing and they're interested in building it. And the other thing they look for with this demand is that the idea has the potential for multiple streams of revenue, multiple sources of revenue. So not just one revenue stream is available to you, even if it has fantastic demand. They really like to see that the solution you're coming up with or the business that you're starting has the potential to generate multiple streams of income. And of course, that makes sense, right? Because if you only have one stream of income and something happens like today with the market, it's gone crazy. If something crazy happens with your startup the industry your startup's in, they like to see you've got some other avenues where you can generate revenue for the business. So there has to be lots of demand across multiple streams of revenue, across multiple markets and or products. The second thing Harvard looks for in determining if an idea is commercially viable is they look for competition. Now, notice I say they look for competition. I've alluded to and talked a little bit about this before, but if there's zero competition, if your idea is that unique that nobody else has done anything even close to what you're doing, it's actually a really, really bad sign, because what that means to people like myself and other people in the industry is that there hasn't been enough demand to demand a solution is created in the first place. So Harvard actually looks for competition and that there is plenty of it, because if there isn't, that means there just isn't enough people wanting a solution in the first place. So number two, they look for competition. Now, number three, catch this one. This might be pretty interesting to you, is they look for the opportunity to license your solution. So last time my family and I were watching Shark Tank, we actually haven't watched it, and I personally haven't watched it in probably at least a year. My family watches it every now and then. We were watching it together last night. And one of the people that was pitching their solution to the sharks, and they got really close to getting an investment. But the reason they lost out on it is they were not willing to license their idea out to other startups or other existing companies. Well, Harvard also looks for a solution that you can license out to other people. Well, why is that so important? Well, the way startup investors look at this is licensing is a much more inexpensive way to get a solution out into the marketplace. You know, if you are building a product, you have to go get all the distribution set up, you have to get the prototypes made, you have to do lots of steps. But if you've just created a solution or product, just enough of one that you can license it to other companies who already have distribution, who already have suppliers, who already have customers, it's a faster way to market, and it's a lot less expensive. Now, it is true that if you're licensing your product, you're probably not going to make as much money if you were selling it yourself through a company. That's true. But it's faster and it's easier. So if you want real beach money, if you want the kind of money where you can sit back and watch, you know, we call it mailbox money, licensing is a great way to go, because all you have to do is take the company to a certain level enough to justify the licensing of that product, and then have other people do all the work from there. So Harvard actually as well, in their guide for commercial viability, is looking for something that is licensable. This next one probably won't come as a shock to you since I talk about funding more than anything else, but Harvard looks for a solution that would have access to capital. It's absolutely important. Most startups these days, you can certainly bootstrap some of them, but to really scale, at the end of the day, you're going to have funding. Now, a little bit of an intangible factor that Harvard looks for in this next one, they look for commitment. They want founders who are committed to what they're doing. They don't want quote unquote serial entrepreneurs that aren't willing to see something through to the end. So they're looking for someone who's absolutely passionate about the solution that they developed, that the market that they're going into, and that is committed to seeing it reach the market and growing. Really, really important factor. Another factor they look for is support. They look for the presence of a true champion for the venture. Now, that could be the founder, but they also like it to be someone who's not part of the founding team of a startup. So maybe it's an advisor. Maybe you get an advisor on board who knows your space really well. Here's an example. Just today, I talked to a gentleman who is developing a startup that is somewhat similar to when I started all the way back in 2010, so 9 years ago. And we got to talking about my experience, and we shared experiences, and he threw out there, would I be interested in being an advisor in a startup? It's a really great idea. Seems like a nice guy, just not where I'm at in my life and something I'm interested in doing. But my point is, had I come on board and I also was a true champion of the idea, that means a lot to investors. And so it's why someone like or area like place like Harvard, it's a factor they look for is support from these true champions that are willing to push the idea forward. And then the last factor that they look for is they look for management. Now, really what they're saying at the end of the day, and if you listen to enough of my material, my content, they're saying they're looking for a team that has experience and is focused on what they're doing and willing to put the time in to see it become commercially viable. Now, I'll link to the guide in the notes, but the other thing this guide went through after they went through these factors was they went through some questions that could help you decide whether or not you should try and bring your idea to bear. And I thought these were really good, but I only picked 3 that caught my attention to share with you. So number 1, how soon can a product or service come to market? Speed to market is absolutely critical. The faster you're able to ramp up and get your idea out into the marketplace, the better. Speed becomes a barrier to entry to keeping competitors from gobbling up your market share and spitting you out. So think about how soon the idea that you have, how quick can you get it to market and take over some of that market share. The other question that I thought was great, which is, what is your exit strategy? When I coach businesses, whether startup or existing, I'm always asking them, what's the exit strategy? What's the plan? Will you sell out to someone else? Will you let someone inherit the business that's in your family? What is the exit strategy? Because this actually guides a lot of the decisions that you make up along the way about how you raise capital and the people you hire and all these different things. It's really, really important to ask that question before you even get started. What will my exit strategy be? Obviously that can change, but it's a great question. And then the third question they ask that you should really ask yourself is, what's the goal of the company in the first place? You need to decide this early on so that when you are growing the business, you build it in such a way that it accomplishes your personal goal. And maybe your goals will change, but I've worked with entrepreneurs who really, the only reason they're bringing this solution to bear in the market is because they really just want to see it happen. They want to positively impact the world in some way. Whereas some entrepreneurs are starting a business because they just want to make money. It doesn't matter what your goal is with the company. It's your company. You can have that goal, and it's okay if you're monetarily driven to some extent, right? Let's not be greedy, but if money means a lot to you, it's okay. Let's just be honest about that and be honest that that is the goal of the company, because it will guide the decisions that you make along the way. So, quick summary of some things that Harvard even looks for in a startup business to be commercially viable, and some questions that I think you should be asking yourself. Till next time, hope you find your voice and find funding. See you later.